introduction has to be under a minute, I've decided. So I just want to say welcome, at-home learners. And today in class, what we are going to do is we're going to start by talking about the writing process. You're going to hear a story. And as you're listening to the story, I want you to think, well, what is the process that this writer is going through? And then we're going to come up with some kind of definitions for each of the stages of the writing process. And then the second part of our morning is going to be kicking off the narrative genre. And this is going to be our first piece of formal writing. It's going to take us all the way through October. So you will be doing this writing as well as your independent writing project. And today we're just going to kick it off. And so should be a fun day. That's it. I'm over my minute, and I will not delay anymore. Bye. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is pull up your new digital writer's notebook, and you'll find it in Google Classroom. It says narrative writing on it. And even if you are keeping a hard copy, I would like you to pull this up. The table of contents is going to kind of give you a lay of the land of the lessons that we will be doing over the next couple of weeks. I should say few weeks. And so the first thing I want you to do is go to the page that says, what is the writing process? Now, for those of you who are keeping a hard copy notebook, I want you to write this across the top of the page and make yourself a little table. And I'm going to read a story. It's called Author a True Story. It's by Helen Lester. And so it is nonfiction because it says, she tells us right away, this is her story. And so as I read this, I want you to think to yourself, well, what is the process that she is going through in writing this story? Okay, so let me begin. Author a True Story by Helen Lester. A long time ago, there lived a 3-year-old author, me. I was the best grocery list writer in the world and a huge help to my mother. When I wrote a word, I knew exactly what it said. And the fun part was that I could turn each list upside down and the word said the same thing. I think I made hundreds of these useful lists for my mother, and she never once said, "No, thank you, dear, I have enough." Then I went to school and learned to make what they called real letters. My writing was the prettiest in class, with straight lines and round lines. It was perfect, and it was perfectly backwards. I didn't just mix up the B's and the D's. That's easy to do because they look so much alike. My letters started at the right, well, wrong, side of the paper and marched across pretty as could be, and backwards. There's a name for someone with this problem. I was a mirror writer. My teacher had to hold my work up to a mirror to understand what I had written. Thanks to a lot of help, I was finally able to write in the proper direction. But writing stories was so hard for me. Often, I couldn't come up with a single idea and my stories got stuck in the middle, and I couldn't think of a title, and I had trouble making the changes my teacher wanted me to make. And I lost my pencils, and I wondered why I was doing this, and I got very, very, very frustrated. So I spent a lot of time dreaming what I wanted to be when I grew up. Since no one from the circus came looking for me, I became a teacher. I learned that teachers do not live in schools eating only crackers and milk and sleeping under their desks. I also learned that teaching was fun and that children have fantastic imaginations. So my favorite subject to teach was writing. And I thought I spent 10 years in second grade, so I know a child from a chicken. Maybe I should write. I went home, and I wrote a book. It was the best book I had ever written, of course. It was the only book I had ever written. I illustrated it with my nicest drawings, and I proudly sent it to a publisher. Lucky people, I thought. The lucky people sent it back and said, "No, thank you." That's called a rejection. I decided I'd never write again until the next day when I felt better. I wrote a second book and I sent it to a different publisher. And the second publisher sent the book back, "No, thank you." I decided I'd never write again until the next day when I felt better. I wrote another book and another and another and another. Practice must have helped each story get a little better. For on my seventh try, no book came back. Just a yes, please, and that's called an acceptance. I was beside myself with joy and excitement. I was the first author I'd ever met. I drew the pictures for my first book, and I did the pictures for this book, but usually I work with an illustrator who has been to art school and who can draw bicycles and refrigerators and pigs. This talented person draws what I would if I could. My pig, my illustrator's pig. So here I am, an author, and every time I sit down to write, perfect words line up in perfect order, and whoop, a perfect book pops out of the computer. Bingo. Well, not exactly. Sometimes writing stories is so hard for me. I can't come up with a single idea, and my stories get stuck in the middle, and I can't think of a title, and I have trouble making the changes my editor wants me to make, and I lose my pencils, and I wonder why I'm doing this, and I get very, very, very frustrated. But that's sometimes. I love it best when ideas are hatching so fast I can barely write them down. I grab the nearest thing to write on and get so excited I forget what I was doing in the first place. And the ideas that come in the middle of the night are hard to read the next day. And not all ideas are useful. I keep a whole box full of fizzled thoughts and half-finished books. I call it my fizzle box. And whenever I need an idea, I can go to the box and find wonderful things, just the name I needed. A funny word, a nice lesson. Never comb your feathers backwards. The curious rodent. The rodent was curious. Nope, the rodent trembled with curiosity from his teeth to his tail. Or, how about the rodent's head was stuck in the bed? Could his curiosity have led to this? I used to think that writing had to be done at a special time while sitting at a desk, but slowly I discovered that I could write any time and anywhere, and I especially like to write when I am bored, because then I'm not anymore. Of course, writing anytime, anywhere sometimes means writing on anything. Authors are lucky, for they get to meet hundreds of children through letters, school, and library visits, and at autographing sessions. I didn't always like autographing books. The first time I autographed, my table was next to the table of a very famous author. I was not the very famous author. Her line had no end. Mine had no beginning. I'm glad I didn't join the circus, even though writing is sometimes hard work. It's what I love to do. I never dreamed I'd become an author. So this is better than a dream come true. So now I want you to go back to your digital writer's notebook or to the page in your notebook that says, what is the writing process? And we're just going to jot down a couple notes here. So pre-writing, that is the stage where you are doing lists. Most of this is going to take place in a writer's notebook. And this is where you are just gathering ideas. So if you remember at the beginning of the year when I showed you my daughter's notebook, she would grab, brochures or shells, and she would stick those in her notebook, and those would serve as seed ideas for her future writing. So all of that work is really considered pre-writing. Now, drafting is getting the story out. And this is just getting that story out. And we're going to do this in Google Docs. The reason we are doing it in Google Docs is so that when we go to that next stage, it is easy for us. And then the next stage is revision. And that, if you remember in Author A True Story, when she was talking about the rodent. So this is an exact example of what a revision looks like. So she starts the curious rodent. Then the rodent was curious. No, the rodent trembled with curiosity from his teeth to his tail. Too much. And then she went to the rodent's head was stuck in the bag. Could the curiosity have led to this? So she's rewriting. She is trying to make her writing better. And that is what revision is. It is making your writing better. And if you look at our table of contents, so many of these lessons are going to be on revision. So this lesson, how to add details that are relevant, specific, and sufficient, how to use sensory details, how to show not tell, how to use figurative language, how to capture the audience's attention. I could do 1,000 revision lessons. These are just the ones that I've picked for this first writing piece. But all of the lessons are geared to making your writing better. Now, editing is different than revision. Where editing, you are going to go and you're going to clean it up. This is the cleanup. And this is where you are making sure, and we'll go over this more in detail, but this is where you are making sure that every sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with some type of punctuation. We're going to talk about how the paragraph can be your friend. We're going to go back to punctuating dialogue. So this is where you are using, you're really going to focus on the conventions that make your writing clear. So spelling, of course, caps, commas, and we'll focus on a few at a time until we get better. And then publishing, this is where you're making your writing, it's ready for the world to see. Your writing, is ready for the world to see it. And this is where we're going to spend time. We're going to publish it. And some of you will publish digitally and put your writing on your website. Some of you are going to print off, and maybe even, if I'm super lucky, you will let me hang your writing up in the hall or in my classroom, even better. So anyway, that is really the process of writing. Now, I'm not going to delay. I want to go straight into the next part of this lesson, which is what makes a narrative a narrative. Okay, so what I like to do when I'm trying to get my head around any genre is I will look for an example of a genre. And so this is a personal narrative example. It's called Mashed Potato Pizza. And this is a 6th grade writing sample at the end of this 6th grade. So here it goes. My grandpa always tells me that people who laugh at their own mistakes will get everyone else to laugh along with them. Yesterday, I learned that he is right. Stay in line, Mrs. Martin said. I knew right away that my friend Naomi wouldn't be able to cut. I looked at Naomi and frowned. Soon the line began to move faster, and I followed along, hoping that there would still be pizza. When I reached the counter, I looked at the choices. I could only see chicken and mashed potatoes, macaroni and cheese, and fish. I could hear the rumbling of my very disappointed stomach. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw one last piece of pepperoni pizza. I got so excited. Pepperoni pizza? I said politely. Mrs. Martin handed me the pizza. I took the paper plate so quickly that the pizza slid off the plate. I tried to save it, but the pizza landed in the pan of hot, buttery mashed potatoes. I could feel my face turning redder and redder. All I could hear was laughter from the kids in line. As I looked at the upside-down pizza, I heard Mrs. Martin's voice. Maria, Would you like a side of mashed potatoes with your pizza? I looked up and saw Naomi. She was laughing too. With a nervous smile, I said, Of course. Mrs. Martin smiled and scooped the mashed potato pizza on my plate. I looked around at my friends. We all laughed again. I never really believed my grandpa until I saw my friends laughing with me. The laughing made me feel good instead of clumsy. So that's a really fun narrative that this student wrote. And I want you to go to the page that says what makes a narrative a narrative. Now, if you were in class, I would not be just giving you this, but I want to just, for the sake, since you're at home and I can't really see you, first of all, a narrative tells a story. And that is, it's one of the oldest forms of communication. And it comes so naturally to us. But there is some differences between telling a story and writing a story. And we're going to talk about that. But at the very heart, a narrative tells a story. And then if we look at that piece, and I'm going to get this much bigger so you can see what I am doing. Narrative tells a story. And then if we look at that piece, I want to look at all of the things that they have. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then you can see a conclusion. So I want to make sure that when I think of a narrative, I know that it's going to have a beginning, a middle, an end, and a conclusion. I said these are capitalized. Okay. And that's an important part of a narrative. You want to tell the story. And this is specifically when we're talking about narrative writing, because have you ever met someone, Mrs. Reed is a candidate of this, who starts telling a story, then they go off in another tangent, and then they go back to the story. Well, when we're writing a narrative, you want to make sure that it's a very clear beginning, middle, and an end. And you want your reader to be able to follow. That's the purpose that you're trying to tell this story. Most narratives, if you can see, they're going to have some dialogue in them. And we want to make sure that we know that. So we're going to add dialogue to the story. And most narratives are really about one specific, I love that word, it's one of my verbal habits, moment. They're not all over the place. You know, you really want to be specific. It's about one incident. In this particular case, the student was in line and dropped the pizza into the mashed potatoes. Lastly, there's details that only the author knows. Like, you know, we don't know, you tell in your narrative how you felt about something. And so her face turned red. So we can infer that she was embarrassed. But those specific details, again with that word, Mrs. Reed, but those details are what makes your writing great. They're the details that only the writer knows. And then the last thing, and this comes from Nancy Atwell, who's also a famous guru in the writing, it's got to have a so what. You know, and I know that some of us tell stories and they go on and on and on and on, and you're just sitting there thinking, so what? So I'm going to actually make this super big, and I want you to too, because you want your story to have a so what. Why are you bothering to tell the story if there isn't a so what? What is the so what? And sometimes we don't even know the so what until we start doing the story. Okay, for those of you who are like me, who want those little check marks, you highlight and then you're going to go up to where the bulleted list is, but you pull down that arrow next to it and you go over to the checks. And then sometimes you have to get rid of the extra ones, which I do right now. Okay, so that is what makes a narrative a narrative. Now we have one more thing to do today, and that is going to be making your list. So when writers are planting seed ideas, they will sometimes create lists. And what I'd like you to do is spend 10 minutes and just jot down maybe some happy memories, maybe some funny memories, maybe some sad memories. Maybe you don't want to write any sad memories. That's okay. Or you're not feeling funny today. That's okay. Just try and fill in at least 5 memories. And then we're going to pick one of those for the idea that you're going to grow into your first narrative paper. Okay, so that is it, writers. Once you have finished this page, you are finished for the day. Thank you so, so much. Bye.